The frost-bitten air of the onyx fang territory clung to Elara's skin like a second punishment. She walked with her head bowed, as if the ground itself were safer company than the eyes that followed her every step. Whispers trailed behind her, sharp as knives, each word dipped in venom. Stray, curse, ghost. None of them dared speak her name, for to them she had none. Elara had grown used to it, used to the shadows, used to the hunger in her belly, used to the silence that had become her only companion. But she had never grown used to the pain. It came fresh each day, striking with new cruelty, like an open wound that refused to heal. And at the heart of that cruelty was Marana, the she-wolf with hair like fire and eyes like frost, the one who had declared herself the jewel of the pack. Marana ruled not with kindness, but with cruelty, and she delighted in reminding Elara of her place. Every sneer, every shove, every cruel laugh had become the rhythm of Elara's existence. The scar on her wrist remained hidden beneath the sleeve of her worn dress, a crescent moon etched into her skin since childhood. She traced it sometimes in the dark, when no one could see, when she still allowed herself to remember. But here, in the pack that loathed her, it was nothing but a brand of shame. If anyone saw it, the whispers would turn into something worse. That evening, the pack gathered in the stone courtyard, torches burning against the snow-chilled wind. The Alpha King had returned, and the onyx fang wolves gathered to honor him. Elara stood at the very edge, trying to disappear into the shadows, her body trembling as though the cold itself despised her. Marana's laughter rose above the murmurs of the crowd, honey-sweet and venom-laced. She approached Elara with a smile that promised nothing but cruelty. "Oh, look!" Marana said loudly, drawing eyes. "The stray dares to sanctide." And among wolves, a ripple of amusement spread through the pack. Elara's breath hitched, but she remained still, eyes fixed on the ground. Marana circled her like a predator circles prey. Her hand brushed the thin fabric of Elara's dress, tugging at the frayed edges. "So fragile," she purred, "so unworthy." Then, with a sudden motion, she seized the front of Elara's dress and tore it. The sound of ripping fabric was deafening. Gasps broke from the crowd. Elara froze, her body rigid, her heart crashing against her ribs. Cold air struck her skin as the dress fell in tatters, exposing her trembling form before the pack. Laughter erupted, cruel, merciless laughter. It wrapped around her like chains, crushing the breath from her chest. Her arms crossed over her body in a desperate attempt to shield herself, but the damage had been done. Her pride lay in pieces on the frozen ground. Tears burned her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She would not give Marana that victory. She stood shaking, humiliated, broken before them all. Whispers rose, crueler now, fueled by the scent of her shame. "She's nothing. She's filth. She doesn't belong." And then, silence. The crowd parted like a tide. Boots struck the stone floor with a rhythm that carried authority, strength, power. Kaelen, the Alpha King, stepped into the circle of torchlight. His presence silenced even the boldest tongue. Tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes burned like storm-forged steel. He did not speak at first. He did not need to. Every wolf felt the weight of his gaze as it fell upon Elara. She dared a glance upward. Her breath caught. For the first time, someone looked at her, not with pity, not with hatred, but with something she did not understand. Something fierce. Something protective. Kaelen's jaw tightened as his gaze shifted to Marana. The she-wolf's smirk faltered under the storm gathering in his eyes. "Enough!" his voice thundered, echoing off the courtyard walls. the laughter died instantly. No one moved. No one dared. Kaelen's cloak, heavy and black with the sigil of his crown embroidered in silver, slid from his shoulders. With deliberate steps, he crossed the space between them. The sound of the fabric brushing stone was louder than the heartbeat in Elara's ears. She flinched as he approached, expecting another blow, another humiliation. But instead, he draped the cloak around her shoulders. The warmth of it swallowed her. The weight of it pressed against her skin like a shield. Gasps broke out across the courtyard. Kaelen did not stop there. He placed a hand on her trembling shoulder and pulled her against his side. Her body stiffened, stunned, every nerve alive with disbelief. The Alpha King stood before his pack, a stray wrapped in his royal cloak, his arm holding her close. The silence was deafening. Every eye was wide, every breath caught. And then came the collective gasp. It rolled through the crowd like thunder, disbelieving, shocked, electric. Did the king just claim her? A nameless stray, a girl they had all laughed at, tormented, despised. Elara's heart pounded as if it would burst from her chest. The world tilted, spinning in a blur of fear and hope. For the first time, she felt the weight of a gaze not meant to destroy her, but to save her. And in that moment, as Kaelen's cloak enveloped her torn dress and his arm anchored her trembling body, the story of her life shifted. The pack saw it. Elara felt it. Something irreversible had just been set into motion. The torches flickered. The air grew heavy. The night itself seemed to hold its breath, and the question lingered in the stunned silence. Had the Alpha King just claimed the stray with the crescent scar? The courtyard remained hushed long after the Alpha King's cloak had settled across Elara's trembling shoulders. Even the flames in the torches seemed uncertain, flickering as though they too dared not disturb the silence. Kaelen's arm was firm around her, yet his eyes remained fixed on the crowd, daring anyone to speak, daring anyone to move. Not a soul did. When the moment passed, he released her gently, though the warmth of his touch lingered against her skin like a brand. Elara stood still, clutching the heavy cloak around herself, her breath shallow, her pulse frantic. It felt unreal, as though she had stumbled into a dream too fragile to hold. The humiliation of moments ago had not vanished, but it had been drowned beneath something far more terrifying. Attention. She had lived her whole life in shadows, surviving only because she was invisible. Now every eye was on her, and it felt like standing naked beneath the moon. Kaelen turned without another word, his gaze flicking once more toward her before he strode away. The crowd parted for him again, silent, reverent, afraid. Morana's fury simmered in the background, her lips pressed tight, her eyes spitting venom. But she did not speak. Not tonight. Not when the Alpha King himself had placed a cloak upon the stray she despised. Elara slipped away when no one was watching, her body shaking with every step. Her tiny hut at the edge of the packlands felt even colder than usual, though Kaelen's cloak still hung heavy around her shoulders. She pressed her face into the fabric, inhaling the faint scent of cedar and smoke. It made her heart ache in ways she did not understand, and it terrified her. Kaelen himself, however, could not forget what he had seen, long after the courtyard emptied, long after his beta had dismissed the guards. The image of Elara stood vivid in his mind. The way she trembled, but did not break. The way her eyes, though lowered, carried storms within them. He was haunted, unsettled. A king could not afford distraction, yet she clung to his thoughts like a whisper he could not silence. He found no rest that night, even as dawn broke over the Emmy. Mountains! He carried her face with him, the sound of her breathless stillness, the way she had looked at him as though his presence was both salvation and danger. Why did she matter? Why did his heart stir with protective rage at the thought of her suffering? He could not answer. When morning came, the training grounds rang with the clash of steel and the growl of wolves shifting. Kaelen stood at the edge, his gaze sweeping over his warriors. But when Elara appeared, hesitant, uncertain, hovering near the gates, his breath caught against his will. She had not come willingly. He could see it in the way her hands twisted in front of her, in the way her eyes darted for an escape route. Yet she came, perhaps compelled by something she did not yet name. The cloak was gone, replaced by her old patched dress, but he noticed the faint tremor in her steps. She carried her wounds quietly, yet they screamed to him louder than battle cries. He signaled her forward. Every gaze turned, curious, skeptical, some cruel. Elara's chin lowered further, her shoulders folding inward. She looked as though she might vanish if pressed too hard. Still, she obeyed. "Here!" Kaelen's voice carried the weight of command. She stopped before him, her heart hammering, her eyes refusing to rise to his. "You will train," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Murmurs rippled across the warriors gathered, disbelief at the king's words. But Kaelen ignored them all. He extended a wooden staff, pressing it gently into Elara's trembling hands. Her fingers closed around it slowly, as though holding a weapon were a crime she might be punished for. The weight startled her. The calluses on her palms stung as she gripped it tighter. Kaelen stepped closer, his hand brushing hers as he corrected her grip. Heat surged through her at the contact, a shock she could not conceal. Her breath quickened, her pulse raced. "Steady," Kaelen murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Elara swallowed hard, forcing her shaking body to obey. The staff wobbled less, though her arms burned with the effort. She had never been allowed to fight, never been taught, always told she was unworthy of strength. Yet here she was, standing in the center of the king's warriors, trying to hold her ground. Cyrus watched from the shadows near the training grounds. His eyes, old and sharp, narrowed as they tracked Elara's movements. Where others saw a broken stray, he saw a puzzle, and puzzles always had answers. His lips curled into the faintest smirk as his gaze lingered on her hidden wrist. "Again," Kaelen ordered, pushing against her staff. The force nearly sent her stumbling, but she planted her feet, surprising even herself. For a flicker of a moment, defiance sparked in her eyes, a fire long buried beneath years of cruelty. Kaelen saw it, and it struck him harder than any blade. The warriors around them muttered, some mocking, others bewildered, but Kaelen heard none of it. He saw only her. The way her chest rose and fell with determined breaths, the way she bit her lip to steady her trembling. She was fighting, not just him, but the ghosts of every voice that had ever told her she was nothing. And for reasons he could not yet name, it made his chest ache with something dangerously close to hope. He moved again, striking harder, testing her balance. Her staff faltered, but she caught herself. Sweat dotted her brow. Her eyes flicked up, just once, meeting his for a heartbeat that seemed to last forever. Something unspoken passed between them. Something she was too afraid to believe, and he was too uncertain to name. But it was there, undeniable. Kaelen stepped closer, lowering his voice once more. "Do not hide," he whispered. Her breath hitched, her grip tightening on the staff. She began, but her words tangled in her throat. Then, without warning, Kaelen's hand slid down her arm. Firm, deliberate, he reached her wrist. Before she could pull away, before she, He could shield it. His fingers brushed against the fabric that concealed her secret, and in one swift motion he lifted her sleeve. The crescent moon scar glimmered faintly against her skin, the mark she had hidden all her life. The breath of the training ground froze. Elara gasped, her body seizing with terror, and Kaelen's eyes widened, storm and fire colliding in his gaze. Kaelen's hand lingered a fraction longer on her wrist, his gaze locked on the crescent moon scar. The mark glowed faintly in the sunlight that broke through the morning clouds, a silver curve against her pale skin. Elara pulled her arm back with a sharp breath, clutching it to her chest as though it were a wound freshly torn open. Her eyes widened, fear flashing like lightning in their depths. The warriors surrounding them whispered, their voices a hiss of speculation. None spoke loud enough to be heard by the king, but their murmurs carried. Elara's chest tightened as shame threatened to crush her again. But Kaelen did not expose her. He did not speak the secret aloud. Instead, his gaze darkened with something unreadable, and he handed her staff back into her trembling hands. "Again," he commanded, his voice steady, unyielding. The crowd blinked, stunned by his dismissal of what they had seen. The whispers dulled, though not entirely silenced. Elara swallowed hard, confused by his choice. Why had he not called her out? Why had he not shamed her as they all expected? Her arm shook as she raised the staff once more. Kaelen struck against it, harder than before. The wood jarred her bones, her knees buckled, but she refused to fall. Something burned inside her, a stubborn fire that flared every time he tested her strength. He saw it. He wanted it, and he pushed her to find more of it. The warriors around them watched with disbelief. Where they saw a stray faltering, Kaelen saw a fighter rising. Every time she stumbled, he corrected her stance with the gentlest brush of his hand. Every time her grip weakened, his touch steadied her fingers. It was a rhythm, a quiet dance between them that no one else understood. Elara felt it too. Though fear and humiliation clung to her, something else stirred beneath it. Whenever his hand guided hers, her breath caught. Whenever his eyes lingered on her, heat spread through her chest. It was confusing, dangerous, yet impossible to ignore. Kaelen noticed the way her lashes lowered when his fingers grazed her arm. He noticed the defiant spark in her gaze when he challenged her too harshly. It unsettled him, this pull, this tether forming between them. He was a king. She was a ghost in the pack. Yet the space between them crackled like fire catching dry wood. Marana stood at the edge of the training ground, her nails digging into her palms until blood welled beneath them. Her lips curled in a twisted smile that did not reach her eyes. How dare this stray steal his attention? How dare Kaelen look at Elara with a gaze that had never once been hers? Jealousy burned hotter than wildfire inside her chest. She turned sharply, her heels grinding into the dirt as she stormed away. If the Alpha King would not open his eyes, she would open them for him. If he could not see the danger, she would paint it so vividly that he could not ignore it. Elara collapsed to her knees when Kaelen finally stepped back, her breath ragged, her body aching. Sweat clung to her hairline, her chest rising and falling with desperate gasps. Yet even in her exhaustion, there was pride in her eyes. A small flame, fragile but alive. Kaelen's lips pressed into a faint line as he extended his hand to her. For a moment she hesitated, staring at it as though it were a trap. Then, slowly, she placed her palm in his. The strength of his grip pulled her easily to her feet. Her heart stuttered at the closeness, the warmth, the unspoken promise in that simple act. The crowd had seen enough. They left murmuring, confused, unsettled, whisperish, saying to each other about the king and the stray who dared hold a weapon. But in the shadows, Cyrus lingered. His keen eyes had missed nothing, not the scar, not the way Kaelen's hand lingered, not the storm quietly brewing beneath the surface. That night, the pack feasted in the great hall. Elara kept to the edges, eating little, her body sore, but her mind reeling. She could still feel the ghost of Kaelen's hand on her wrist, the heat of his touch guiding her. She hated herself for it, for wanting it, for needing it. Kaelen sat on his throne, but his eyes drifted more often than he realized. Every time they landed on her, he found her gaze lowered, her body small, but her spirit hummed louder than anyone else's. He tried to ignore it. He failed. Mirana's laughter carried through the hall, sweet and poisonous. She leaned close to anyone who would listen, her voice dripping like honey laced with venom. "Have you not seen her wrist?" she whispered. "She hides it because it betrays her blood." Her audience leaned closer, hungry for scandal. "Not one of us," Mirana continued, her tone sharp with malice. "She carries the blood of our enemies." The words slithered through the crowd like smoke. They spread quickly, weaving doubt and suspicion into every corner of the hall. The sound of Elara's name carried on the whispers, though she could not hear them over the roar of her own pulse. And in the far corner, where shadows swallowed most of his face, Cyrus listened. His eyes narrowed. His smile was slow, dangerous, knowing. Every rumor was a seed, and Mirana had just planted the one he had been waiting for. The air in the training yard was cool, carrying the faint tang of iron and dust. The moon sat high, casting silver shadows across the worn stone floor. Kaelen stood waiting, his presence commanding, yet softer than the warriors who lingered nearby. He was not a king tonight, not entirely. He was something else, something more dangerous and more human. Elara entered hesitantly, her cloak drawn tight, her eyes wary. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She had avoided this space, avoided the idea of sparring with the Alpha King himself. But she could not refuse him, not when his gaze demanded her courage. Kaelen tossed her a wooden blade. She caught it awkwardly, fumbling before steadying her grip. His mouth twitched, not in mockery, but in something close to encouragement. "Hold it like you mean it," he said, stepping closer. His hand covered hers, adjusting her stance. The heat of his touch lingered even when he pulled away. Elara swallowed hard, forcing her breath into control. "Again," he ordered, circling her. She raised the blade, her movements stiff but determined. Their clash began softly, wood against wood. Kaelen moved with grace, each strike precise, each step deliberate. Elara stumbled, yet something inside her sparked, a fire that had long been smothered beneath humiliation. She struck back, her blade clumsy, but her spirit fierce. He tested her with every motion, pushing, pulling, never letting her retreat fully. Sweat trickled down her brow, her muscles trembling, but she refused to yield. Kaelen's eyes gleamed with approval, his heart pounding with something he could not name. Their rhythm grew, strike, block, step, counter. Their breaths synced, their movements aligning until it was no longer training, it was a dance. The yard fell away, the world narrowing to the space between them. Elara lunged, surprising him with sudden boldness. He deflected, yet her blade grazed his arm, leaving a faint sting. Her lips parted, startled by her own courage. Kaelen chuckled low, the sound rough, intimate. "There it is," he murmured. "That fire I knew was hiding." Her chest tightened. For the first time, she saw herself reflected in his eyes, not as a stray, not as a shadow, but as something more. The connection between them pulsed, alive, undeniable. Their dance slowed, their blades dropping lower. Kaelen's hand reached to steady her arm, his fingers brushing her skin. Her breath caught, her heart leaping. The night grew still, charged with an energy neither dared to name. She tilted her head up, and he leaned closer, their lips trembling on the edge of something forbidden. The world hushed, the distance between them thinned to a heartbeat. "Kaelen!" The sharp voice shattered the moment. Lysander strode across the yard, urgency etched into his every movement. Kaelen stepped back instantly, the mask of a king snapping into place. Elara stumbled, heat rushing to her cheeks, the spell broken. "What is it?" Kaelen asked, his voice firm, though his eyes still lingered on Elara. Lysander's face was pale beneath the torchlight. "A messenger from the border," he said quickly. "He carries news you must hear at once." Kaelen nodded, tension crawling across his shoulders. Elara remained silent, gripping her wooden blade as though it were her lifeline. The moment they had shared dissolved like mist, yet its echo clung stubbornly to the air. The gates creaked open, and a hooded figure stepped into the yard. His cloak was torn, his body weary, his eyes haunted. He carried a sealed scroll in his trembling hand. Dropping to one knee, he extended it toward Kaelen. The Alpha King broke the seal with steady fingers. The parchment crackled as he unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words, darkening with every line. When at last he lowered the scroll, silence weighed heavy on the yard. Lysander leaned forward. "What does it say, my king?" Kaelen's jaw clenched. His gaze flicked to Elara, unreadable, burning with something dangerous. The messenger's voice cracked through the silence, hoarse and shaken. "My lord, there is a traitor among us." The words struck like a blade to the gut. Elara's breath stilled, her fingers numb around the wooden sword. She glanced at Kaelen, but his eyes were shadowed, unreadable. The messenger continued, his voice a tremor, and the first name whispered was hers. Every sound drained from the world. The torchlight seemed to falter. Elara stood frozen, the weight of countless eyes upon her, the echo of betrayal crashing like thunder in her ears. Kaelen's hand tightened around the scroll as his gaze locked on Elara, torn between fury, disbelief, and something far more dangerous. The word hung in the night like a curse. "Her!" The messenger's whisper clung to the silence, heavy as lead. Every eye in the yard cut toward Elara, suspicion rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Elara's lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat tightened, dry as dust. She felt her body sway, as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted. Her chest rose and fell too fast, panic clawing at her ribs. Kaelen stood rooted, the scroll still in his hand. His knuckles whitened as he gripped it tighter. He wanted to deny it outright, to crush the rumor where it stood. But the doubt, poisonous, insidious, slid into his mind uninvited. Why her name? Why whispered in secret? Elara's eyes darted toward him, pleading silently. She needed his voice, his shield, his command to silence the wolves who stared at her like she was already guilty. For a heartbeat too long, Kaelen said nothing. And that heartbeat cut her deeper than any blade. Then his voice thundered, sharp and unwavering. "No wolf accuses under shadow!" He stepped forward, placing himself between Elara and the gathering eyes. "You bring me whispers and shadows, not truth, and I will not see justice twisted by rumor." The crowd stirred, uneasy beneath his fury. Some bowed their heads, others exchanged wary glances. The accusation was not forgotten. It clung, refusing to be dismissed so easily. Cyrus moved at last from the edge of the hall, his robes whispering across the stone. His face wore a mask of calm, but his eyes gleamed like steel beneath oil. "Whispers, my king," he said smoothly, "are born from smoke, but smoke rises only when there is fire." Kaelen's jaw tensed. He recognized the elder's tone, honeyed words wrapped around venom. "Speak plainly, Cyrus," he demanded. "I tire of riddles." The elder inclined his head, feigning respect. "My concern lies not with shadows, but with loyalty. This girl," his hand flicked toward Elara like a serpent's tongue, "arrived among us from nowhere. She carries no name, no pack, no history. And yet, she hides a scar upon her wrist, a scar shaped like the moon." A murmur swept the hall. The wolves shifted uneasily, their whispers returning with renewed force. Elara's stomach dropped. Her secret, the one she had buried beneath sleeves and silence, was creeping into the open. Kaelen's voice cut across the murmurs. "You forget yourself, Cyrus. You accuse without proof, and you dare question my judgment." His eyes burned, daring the elder to push further, but Cyrus only smiled, thin and cold. "I question not your judgment, my king. I question the girl who hides behind it." The tension crackled like lightning in the air. Elara stepped back instinctively, the wall of suspicion pressing closer with every passing second. Her heart raced, pounding against her ribs. She could feel their eyes crawling over her, stripping her bare. And then came the heavy sound of boots striking stone. Fenrax emerged from the crowd, broad, scarred, brutal. His very presence silenced the murmurs. The elder's champion, loyal only to Cyrus, and feared by every wolf in the pack. He stepped into the center of the yard, his eyes fixed on Kaelen. "My king," he growled, his voice like gravel grinding together. "The pack demands justice." He slammed a fist against his chest. "If this stray carries enemy blood, then she is a danger to us all. And if you will not act, then I will." The words hung like a challenge. Gasps rippled through the wolves gathered, for Fenrax had not just spoken against Elara. He had dared to question his king. Kaelen's body stiffened. His fury rose, sharp and unrelenting. "You dare raise your voice against my command?" His power rolled off him, heavy as thunderclouds, but Fenrax did not bow. Instead, he stepped, closer, towering, his muscles tense, ready. The air pulsed with violence waiting to break. Lysander moved instinctively toward Kaelen's side, his hand brushing the hilt of his blade. But Kaelen lifted a hand, stopping him. His eyes locked on Fenrax, fire meeting steel. "You think strength gives you the right to demand justice?" Kaelen's voice was low, dangerous. "Then prove it." The words fell heavy, the weight of a challenge clear. Fenrax's grin was cruel. "I was hoping you'd say that." The wolves stirred, excitement sparking in their eyes. A fight between the king and the elder's champion. This was no small thing, but beneath the anticipation lay a darker undercurrent. For many, it was not the fight they cared for. It was the girl at its center. Elara's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. She wanted to scream, to deny, to beg them to stop, but her voice was trapped. This was because of her. And yet, she could do nothing to stop it. Cyrus watched with quiet satisfaction, his hands folded neatly behind his back. Everything was unfolding as he desired. Fenrax's strength against Kaelen's rule. The pack divided, suspicion growing, and all of it circling Elara, tightening like a noose. Kaelen's blade was drawn, the steel glinting in torchlight. Fenrax mirrored the motion, his massive sword heavy in his grip. They circled each other, the crowd pressing in, breathless with anticipation. But before steel could meet steel, Cyrus raised his hand, his voice calm but cutting. "There is no need for blood tonight, my king. Not when the truth lies so close at hand." The crowd stilled. Kaelen turned, fury flashing in his eyes. But Cyrus only smiled, serene, patient. "If the girl is innocent, let her prove it. Let her show us what she hides. Her wrist." His gaze cut to Elara like a blade. "Let the pack see the mark she carries." The words struck like thunder. Elara froze, her body locked in terror. The crowd leaned forward, the hunger for truth burning in their eyes. Kaelen's grip on his sword faltered, his mask cracking under the pressure. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs as Cyrus's voice rang once more, merciless and sharp. "Show us, girl. Show us the wrist you guard like a crown of secrets." The hall held its breath as all eyes turned to Elara, her hidden scar seconds away from being exposed before the entire court. The hall was silent, the kind of silence that devoured breath. Every eye bore down on Elara, sharp, unyielding, merciless. Cyrus's command hung in the air like a blade at her throat. Her wrist burned beneath her sleeve, as though the scar itself had heard its name called. Elara's knees weakened, but she did not fall. She lifted her head, meeting the sea of stares with trembling defiance. Her heart screamed to run, to vanish into the shadows, but there was no escape. The pack pressed in on her, hungry for truth, hungry for blood. Kaelen stood near, his presence a storm contained. His blade was still in his hand, though forgotten. The muscles in his jaw clenched, his chest heaving with a breath he could not release. His eyes flickered between Cyrus and Elara, caught in a snare of doubt. Cyrus's voice slithered through the silence. "If she is truly one of us, let her prove it. If she is not, let the mark speak." The wolves leaned forward, anticipation sparking in their eyes. Elara's chest tightened as she slowly reached for her sleeve. Her fingers trembled, betraying the war raging within her. She wanted to scream, to curse the stars for branding her with a fate she never chose. Kaelen's voice cut through the stillness. "Enough, Cyrus." But even his command wavered, his certainty fractured. The elder's smirk deepened, sensing the crack in the king's armor. Elara's hand hovered at her wrist. The room pressed closer, suffocating her with its demands. Her breath hitched, her throat dry, but she forced her fingers to move. The fabric slid slowly back, inch by inch, until the mark was bared. Gasps tore through the hall like thunder. The crescent moon scar glimmered pale against her skin, undeniable in its shape. A mark older than memory, older than blood. A mark of the blood crescent pack, the sworn enemies of the Onyx Fang. Elara's vision blurred as the sound crashed around her. Shouts rose, voices overlapping in horror and fury. "Blood crescent! Traitor! Enemy!" She clutched her arm to her chest, as though she could hide the truth again. But it was too late. The mark was burned into every mind, into every heart. Her secret was no longer hers. Kaelen's face hardened, the storm within him breaking free. His breath left him in a ragged rush. He had seen the scar before, glimpsed in training, but he had not wanted to believe. Now belief was no longer a choice. It was carved into her flesh. Elara dared to meet his gaze. In his eyes she saw conflict, wild and raw. Love tangled with fear, trust with betrayal, longing with duty. Her heart ached with every silent beat, begging him to see her, not the scar. Cyrus stepped forward, his voice carrying with venomous triumph. "You see it now, my king. The stray you protect is no stray at all. She is the last heir of the blood crescent, the enemy who slaughtered your kin." The words stung deeper than claws. Kaelen's grip tightened on his sword, but he did not strike. He stood frozen, bound by the truth he could not deny. His silence was heavier than any blade. Morana's laugh rang sharp, cruel, echoing against the stone walls. "I told you she was cursed," she sneered. "Now the curse is upon us all." The crowd roared in agreement, fear twisting into anger, anger into hate. Elara's chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. Her world had collapsed in a single moment. No cloak could shield her now, no hand could hide her scar. She was exposed, raw, condemned by the mark of her birth. Her lips parted, words trembling on her tongue. "I did not choose this," she whispered, but her voice was drowned in the uproar. Tears stung her eyes, though she forced them back, unwilling to break before them. Kaelen turned his head, his shoulders rigid, his eyes dark with torment. Every instinct in him screamed to protect her, to silence the crowd, to cut down Cyrus where he stood. And yet his duty screamed louder. His father's ghost whispered of betrayal, of kingdoms lost to misplaced mercy. Lysander's voice tried to rise above the chaos, calling for order, but no one listened. The name Blood Crescent was poison in their ears. It was enough to condemn her 100 times over. Elara took a step toward Kaelen, desperate, trembling. Her voice cracked as she spoke, raw with pain. "Please, believe me. I am not what they say." Her words reached him, but he could not answer. The weight of a kingdom pressed too heavily upon him. Cyrus's smile widened. "Even now she lies. Would you risk your crown, your people, for a girl branded with enemy blood?" The elder's words were knives, and each one twisted deeper. Kaelen's eyes closed briefly, his chest rising with a heavy breath. When he opened them again, they were shadowed. The fire that once burned for her flickered, dimmed beneath the crushing weight of fear. The crowd pressed closer, demanding an answer. Kaelen's hand loosened on his sword, his shoulders slumping under the invisible crown. The king who had wrapped her in his cloak now stood silent. Elara's heart cracked, shattering with every second he withheld his voice. She searched his eyes for hope, for defiance, for love, but found only silence. And silence was worse than any condemnation. Kaelen lowered his gaze. The hall erupted with gasps, some of triumph, others of despair. But to Elara, it was the sound of her world ending. His silence fell heavier than any sentence, leaving Elara to wonder if, in that single moment, the Alpha King had already condemned her. The dungeon was colder than the night above. Stone walls wept with dampness, shadows stretching long and merciless. Elara sat curled, and on the straw-strewn floor, her knees drawn to her chest. Her fingers trembled as they touched the scar on her wrist, the crescent moon mark that had ruined her, the mark that had exposed her, the mark that had condemned her. Her heart did not ache for her own fate. It ached for the silence in Kaelen's eyes, the silence that cut deeper than any blade. She had expected anger. She had prepared for hatred. But silence? Silence meant distance. Silence meant she had already lost him. The torchlight flickered in the corridor. Bootsteps echoed closer. Elara did not look up. She thought it would be Morana, here to gloat, or Cyrus to deliver another venomous speech. But when the heavy door creaked open, it was him. Kaelen, the Alpha King, cloaked in shadow. His crown weighed heavier tonight than ever before. For a moment, neither spoke. Their breaths filled the space between them like fragile threads. "Elara," he said at last, his voice a low rasp. She closed her eyes. She had imagined him saying her name with tenderness. Now it felt like a farewell. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I should be anywhere but here," he answered. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate. The chains on her wrists rattled softly. She tried to hide them, ashamed of how small she looked. But his gaze found her anyway. Kaelen's eyes burned with a war she could not fight. A war between king and man, between crown and heart. "You grieve," he murmured. Her lips parted, but no words came. He knelt before her, lowering himself until their eyes met. "I see it in you. You grieve, but not for yourself." Tears brimmed in her lashes. "No," she admitted. "I grieve for us, for what we might have been." The words cracked, raw and unpolished. He flinched as though struck. "Don't," he said sharply. "Don't speak of endings." Elara shook her head. "There is no tomorrow for me. At moonrise." "Don't." He interrupted again, harsher this time. His hand rose, trembling, but he forced it away before it touched her. He paced the cell like a caged wolf. "They demand your blood," he muttered. "They call you the enemy's heir." Her throat tightened. "And you? What do you call me?" The question cracked through the air. He stopped moving. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Finally, he turned back to her. "I call you mine," he whispered fiercely. Her breath caught. Hope fluttered, dangerous and fragile. "But your people, my people will break before I let them break you." The king in him spoke with steel. The man in him spoke with fire. She shook her head again, despair quivering in every line of her face. "They will never forgive you." "Then let them damn me," he growled. "Let them damn me 1,000 times." The fury in his voice faltered, softening into something more vulnerable. His hand hovered again, then finally touched her cheek. Warmth. The kind of warmth she thought she'd lost forever. "Elara," he said again, and this time her name was a vow. She leaned into his touch despite the chains, despite the fear. Her lips trembled. "Why would you risk everything for me?" "Because everything means nothing without you." The words shattered her defences. She broke, sobs shaking her. His thumb brushed away her tears, rough yet gentle. "Do not cry," he murmured. "Not for them, not for me." "I don't cry for them," she whispered. "I cry because I love you, and love is not enough." His jaw clenched. "Then let me make it enough." He leaned closer, his forehead pressing against hers. For a moment, the dungeon disappeared. There was no crown, no scar, no execution at moonrise. Only them, only heart to heart, breath to breath. "Kaelen," she breathed, breaking on his name. He tightened his grip on her, as though the world itself threatened to pull her away. "If I must fall," he whispered, voice shaking now, "I'll fall with you." The words hung in the air like fire, like promise, like doom. Neither of them noticed the guard. The guard, had paused at the door. The guard whose eyes widened in shock at the king's confession. The guard who turned and fled, footsteps pounding against stone, rushing to report the Alpha King's betrayal, rushing to light the spark that would set the court ablaze. Elara's heart raced, but not from the guard she did not see. She clung to Kaelen's words, even as dread gathered in the dark. The chains bound her wrists, but hope bound her soul. And hope, she realized, was both salvation and curse. The guard's footsteps pounded down the stone corridor. Breath ragged, eyes wide with fear and purpose. He had heard enough to seal a king's fate. He burst into the council chamber where Cyrus lingered. The elder's cold smile sharpened at the frantic report. "Betrayal," Cyrus whispered, savouring the word. The venom spread swiftly, infecting the pack like wildfire. By dawn, rumours grew teeth sharper than any wolf. The Alpha King was no longer just questioned. He was accused. The dungeon doors groaned open. Kaelen stepped out, Elara still bound, her chains clinking softly. The court had gathered in the great hall, their eyes burning. Cyrus's voice rose like a viper striking. "The king has chosen the enemy's heir over his people." Gasps rippled, whispers cutting like knives. Elara lowered her gaze, shame and fear consuming her. Kaelen's chest rose and fell, steady yet heavy. He looked upon his pack, their distrust piercing his skin. He looked upon Elara, her trembling soul piercing his heart, and he chose. "No law, no elder, no decree will condemn her," he thundered. "She is under my protection. She is mine." The words shook the hall. The crowd roared, some in outrage, some in disbelief. Cyrus's smile widened. "Then you defy the crown itself?" Kaelen's eyes blazed. "I am the crown." The silence that followed was brittle, ready to snap. Fenrax stepped forward, towering, muscles coiled wit. Violence. His fists clenched, his teeth gleamed in the torchlight. "Then fight!" he snarled. "Prove yourself in blood!" The challenge could not be denied. Gasps filled the hall again, sharp as blades. Kaelen's jaw tightened. He unfastened his cloak, letting it fall. The weight of his crown seemed nothing compared to this. Elara's heart lurched, chains biting her wrists. She wanted to scream, to beg him not to. But his gaze silenced her. A promise lived in those eyes. A promise that this was not for his throne. This was for her. The hall emptied into the courtyard, moonlight bathing the stone. Wolves circled, chanting, howling for blood. Fenrax stepped into the centre, rolling his shoulders. Kaelen followed, his steps steady, his silence heavier than steel. The duel began with a snarl. Fenrax struck first, claws flashing, teeth bared. Kaelen dodged, the scrape of fang grazing his skin. The crowd screamed for violence. They wanted to see a king bleed. Kaelen countered, his fist colliding with Fenrax's jaw. Bone cracked, but Fenrax only grinned. "You're weaker than your father," Fenrax spat. The insult dug deep, but Kaelen's rage burned brighter. He launched forward, their bodies colliding in a storm of muscle and fury. Blood sprayed across the stone. The fight became more beast than man. Claws tore, teeth sank, flesh split. Elara's voice broke as she cried out his name, but the duel had swallowed them both. Fenrax's strength was merciless. Kaelen staggered under the onslaught, ribs screaming with each blow. Yet still he rose, still he struck. Because love made him relentless. Because love made him defy fate. Fenrax slammed him against the wall, stone shattering. Kaelen gasped, blood spilling down his lips. The crowd howled for his fall. Cyrus's eyes glimmered with victory. But Kaelen's eyes burned hotter. With a roar, he clawed across Fenrax's chest, ripping flesh. The brute bellowed in rage, swinging wildly. Kaelen ducked, then drove his fist into Fenrax's throat. The champion stumbled, coughing blood, but he did not fall. Fenrax grabbed Kaelen's throat, lifting him high. Elara screamed, chains rattling as she fought to break free. Kaelen's vision blurred, darkness edging his sight. But his hand found strength one last time. He struck, claws sinking into Fenrax's side. The brute howled, dropping him. Both wolves fell to the ground, blood pooling between them. The courtyard went silent. Kaelen pushed himself up, knees trembling. He stood, swaying but unbroken. Fenrax groaned, dragging himself upright. The fight was not over. Their bodies collided again, weaker now, but no less fierce. Each strike was a death sentence waiting to land. Each breath was a gamble. The crowd was no longer cheering. They were holding their breath, for this was no longer a duel. It was a war of hearts. Kaelen staggered, falling to one knee. Blood dripped from his brow, staining the stones red. Fenrax loomed above him, grinning through broken teeth. "Elara," Kaelen whispered, her name carrying through the silence. She sobbed, chains cutting her skin as she reached for him. Fenrax raised his claws for the final strike. But then the gates thundered open. Every head turned. Torches flared against the night. Shadows poured through the archway, countless and relentless. Armor glinted, banners unfurled. The blood crescent army had come, and they had come for their heir. The gates groaned as if the earth itself split apart. Torches blazed against the night, casting fire across steel and fur. The blood crescent army surged forward, a tidal wave of wolves in armor. Their banners whipped in the wind, black and silver, marked with the crescent moon. Gasps rippled through the onyx fang courtyard. Some wolves stumbled back in terror. Others bristled, growling, ready to defend their king. Elara's heart stuttered in her chest. She had dreamed of this moment in nightmares, but the reality was sharper, crueler. They had come for her. Kaelen pushed to his feet, blood slicking his skin. His chest heaved, his body broken, but his gaze unyielding. He spread his arms wide, standing between the armies and Elara. "This is my land," he roared. "You will not take her." The blood crescent general snarled, his fangs glinting. "She belongs to us." The words pierced Elara's soul like a blade. Belongs. She was not a woman in their eyes. She was a claim, a weapon, a throne. The onyx fang warriors snarled in return, shifting, claws bared. Chaos trembled on the edge of breaking loose. One spark, and the battlefield would drown in blood. Elara's chains rattled as she stood. Her knees shook, but her spirit burned. She could not let them kill for her. She could not let Kaelen destroy himself. With a breath that tore her chest apart, she stepped forward. "Stop!" Her voice cracked through the night like lightning. Both armies froze. Hundreds of eyes turned to her, wide with disbelief. Elara lifted her chained hands. The crescent scar on her wrist gleamed in the torchlight. Gasps burst from the blood crescent soldiers. Whispers swept their ranks like wildfire. "It's her, the lost heir, our princess." Elara's chest tightened. She had hidden the scar her whole life. Now it burned like a brand for the world to see. "I am Elara," she called, her voice trembling yet fierce. "I am of blood crescent blood, yes, but I am not your queen." Murmurs rose, confusion thick as smoke. She raised her chin higher. "I do not stand before you to claim power." Her gaze swept both sides, meeting Kaelen's shattered eyes. Cyrus's smug smile, Morana's hateful glare. I stand to beg for peace. Silence crushed the air. No one moved. Even the wind seemed to still, listening. You call me heir, but I am no crown, she said. You call me stray, but I am no curse. Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. I am only a woman, a wolf who wants no more graves, no more ashes. Her words rang like a prayer across stone and steel. Some onyx-fang wolves shifted uncertainly, claws lowering. Blood crescent soldiers exchanged wary glances. Tension trembled, led, but something else stirred beneath it. Hope. Elara pressed on, her throat raw, her eyes burning. Look at me, she begged. I have nothing. I own nothing. I seek nothing. Her chains lifted, the scar gleaming brighter than gold. But if my life can be the end of this war, then take it. Take me. Her knees buckled and she sank to the ground. I will not fight you. I will not let you fight each other for me. Her tears struck the stone, glistening in the torchlight. The silence deepened, heavier than thunder. Even Fenrax's ragged breathing faded. Kaelen's lips parted, his chest heaving, his heart tearing apart. The blood crescent general's growl faltered. One by one, the soldiers stilled, their snarls softening into shock. The onyx fang pack watched in disbelief. A single woman, chained and broken, silencing armies with her voice. A hush rippled across the courtyard, like the calm before a storm, or the dawn before a new day. Then, from the front of the blood crescent line, a figure stepped forward. An elder wolf, silver-haired, her presence commanding yet fragile. Her eyes glistened with recognition, with grief, with awe. Rhiannon, someone whispered. The name stirred whispers of reverence. The elder of Blood Crescent, the keeper of their history, the sister of Elara's slain mother. She moved slowly, each step trembling with weight. Her gaze never left Elara. Not once did she blink. When she reached the centre of the courtyard, she paused. Her lips trembled as though fighting back centuries of sorrow. Then she dropped to her knees. Gasps tore the silence apart. An elder kneeling? It was unthinkable. Her head bowed, voice breaking into a whisper. My niece. The words struck like lightning. Elara's breath caught, her heart shattering anew. My queen. The words rippled across the battlefield, echoing into every soul. Both armies stared, stunned into silence. War, balanced on a blade's edge, trembled toward a new destiny. The courtyard was no longer a battlefield. It was a throne carved of silence, lit by torches and trembling breaths. Rhiannon remained kneeling, her silver hair spilling like moonlight over her shoulders. My queen, she whispered again, and her voice carried more weight than any blade. The blood crescent soldiers shifted, stunned, uncertain. Their elder, their guide, their voice of history had bowed. They had never seen her yield to anyone, and now she bent to a girl chained and bleeding. Elara's breath faltered, her lips parted, but no words came. She had never asked for this. She had begged for peace, not crowns. Yet here was Rhiannon, the woman whose lullabies her mother once spoke of, kneeling before her. Kaelen swayed, his chest heaving, his blood staining the stone. He looked at Elara not as a weapon, not as a prize, but as a miracle he could never touch without trembling. The onyx fang wolves remained frozen. Their growls had died in their throats. They watched, waiting, uncertain whether to bow or bare their claws. The night pressed heavy. Even the stars above seemed to lean closer, waiting for her answer. Elara's hands trembled as she lowered them. The chains rattled softly against her wrists. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I am not your queen." But Rhiannon lifted her head, her eyes glistening with unspilled tears. "You are," she said with fierce certainty. "You are blood of our blood, light of our light. You carry her fire." Elara shook her head, her throat raw. "I carry scars, nothing more." The elder's voice softened. "And what is a scar but proof of survival? You are the heir of both grief and strength." The soldiers stirred, whispers rising like a tide. "Is it true? Could she be?" Elara felt their eyes pierce her skin, branding her with hope she had never wanted. She turned, meeting Kaelen's gaze. His lips trembled, but he gave no command. For once, the Alpha had no roar, only silence. He would not sway her choice. It was hers alone. The weight crushed her seal. Hest, pressing harder than any chain. Elara drew a breath that tasted of ash and steel. "I will not be queen," she said, her voice trembling but clear. The whispers faltered, shocked, confused. Rhiannon's eyes widened, but Elara pressed on. "I will not wear crowns forged of bone and blood. I will not rule through fear or war." She rose to her feet, her back straight, her scar gleaming in the torchlight. "But if you must call me something, call me the voice that ends this war." The words rang through the night like a bell. Both armies stilled. The tension that had burned like wildfire began to cool. Kaelen's shoulders sagged, as though years of war finally slid from him. Cyrus's smirk faltered, the arrogance draining from his eyes. Even Morana's lips parted, her venom caught in her throat. Elara's heart raced, her blood thundered, but she stood, unbroken, her chains shining like symbols of defiance. The soldiers who once snarled for blood now lowered their weapons. Some dropped their swords entirely, the clatter echoing in the silence. One by one, wolves fell to their knees, not in submission, but in reverence. Not to a throne, not to a crown, but to a truth that could not be denied. The war was ending. Not with a roar, not with fire, but with a whisper. Rhiannon's voice broke the stillness, soft as prayer. "Then let it be written, the queen without a throne, the voice that turned armies into silence." Elara's chest ached, tears slipping free. Her mother's face flickered in her mind. Warm eyes, gentle touch. Perhaps somewhere beyond the veil she was watching. Perhaps she was proud. Kaelen stepped forward, his knees nearly buckling with each step. He stopped just before her, his hand trembling as it reached for hers. The chains clinked as his fingers brushed her scarred wrist. "You saved us," he whispered. "No," Elara said, her eyes shining. "We saved each other there." Gazes locked, the bond between them stronger than blood or crown. In that moment, the battlefield ceased to exist. It was only them, broken yet whole, scarred yet alive. Behind them,